What's up, everybody, and welcome back to another Hellbound Garage. Today we're going to be working back on the Datsun, and with any luck, let's see some real progress. Now that we're done with doing the chassis, we can finally start putting things back together. Real quick, before we actually get into what we're going to be putting back on the car, let me show you what I actually managed to finish since the last video. Ooh, lots of squeaking. Anyways, sorry about that. I got this done. Would you look at that? Tripping over things in my garage. I got the entire transmission tunnel all sealed up and all done. I actually managed to have a small chunk left over of this stuff, not very much. So if you're gonna do this with your Datsun, it's definitely gonna take 2 rolls of that stuff, of the smaller or 1 big roll. And after doing this, I do kind of recommend doing the smaller roll. And that is because you're gonna end up cutting it apart anyways, and if the sections are smaller, then you have straight lines, you have less chance of your hand wandering and creating weird angles that you then have to deal with. But overall, it was super simple. The other thing that I got done with is, oh god, gets a little heavy sometimes, is this guy. It is completed. Got that section all taken care of, got everything all taped up. A problem I did have is when I left the last video, before I installed the rest of this, I left it for about a week because I went on vacation, and I came back and all the tape that I had placed had started to peel up, and I really wasn't sure what to do. I pressed down really firmly on it. I even did it again when I got back, and it just wouldn't stick. So I was scratching my head. It's like, I spent all this money on this, like I did what they told me to do, and it's supposed to be a relatively flexible thing, and it just didn't want to stick. And it wasn't just the bed liner, which I thought was going to be an issue because of the texture, but it didn't want to stick to the shielding itself. So what I ended up doing is, I'm not sure if this is recommended, but this is what I did so I could get it to work, is I took my little propane torch that I had, this guy right here, and I actually heated up the tape. It wasn't for very long. If you put heat too long, direct heat on the tape for too long, it actually turns a dull shade of silver, and I'm guessing you're burning the coating off of it at that point. But if you heat it up for just a couple of seconds and then you press down, I had a weld glove on, so a torch in one hand, weld glove in the other, and you heat it up, you rub it down real good, the material really softens up and it really sticks, and that really helped make sure that everything's sealed. I now have had everything on the car for a couple of days after heating up the tape, and nothing has peeled up. So it conformed to where I wanted it, and no issues since then. Now let me show you what the plan is for today's video, and that is getting most of this stuff all back on the car. Now, for you guys, this is probably your first time seeing it, but for me, I've had this stuff for a while, and it may look old, kind of like those rotors kind of look old and rusty, but believe it or not, all these parts have less than 1,000 miles on them. Unfortunately, when things sit and they don't get used, and they're in the Midwest with the humidity, things just tend to rust if they're not coated, which is why I was rushing to get this done, because we're going to get to a time of the year where coating things just isn't going to happen. But anyways, all that pile, there's fuel lines, brake lines, the suspension. We'll go over all of what I have, why I bought it, and get it all back on the car, because with any luck, I can get the car itself off the rotisserie and back on jack stands by the end of this video. So we'll see what happens. The very first thing that I'm going to focus on is the brake lines, the fuel lines, and then I think the emergency brake. Those are all really easy things to do. They're not very heavy, but they're also things that pretty much need to be done first with how everything is kind of layered on top of each other with the stock suspension, not parts, but the stock suspension geometry. So let me get that all in, and then I will go from there.
I work hard each and every day. I get lost in the words I say. I don't push pause, no, I push play. I won't stop till I make a change. I withdraw on the things I make. I turn flaws into flawless traits. I build tall, never capped in space. I won't stop till I hear him say, oh, oh, la, 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 la. And I'm up again. I got tired eyes, need a cup of blend. That's right, in the AM, that's my only friend. No light, just the sun coming up on the horizon. I lose track of time, yeah, I move fast and climb a new class divine, yeah, true passion shines. And I'm through passing time, I choose stacking dimes. You snooze half the time while I move passing by. I work hard each and every day. I get lost in the words I say. I don't push pause, no, I push play. I won't stop till I make a change.
I've got most of my brake lines, most of my fuel lines, and my e-brake cable back in place. Let me flip you around and I'll kind of explain what I got going on, and we'll go from there. From the firewall back, I'm not going to do anything in the firewall right now, just because I can do that stuff when the car is back on the ground. But anyways, so the fuel lines that I have is a -6 or -8. I don't remember. Anyways, one of those two. I have a bulkhead here. That way I don't have a really long line with no disconnect. So that's why I did that. It was a recommendation, and I did this years ago. Back when this car still had an L28 in it. Anyways, on the feed side, I do have a, I think it's a Micron filter by Edelbrock. It is the recommended filter size for fuel injection. So we go back, we have P-clamps that are held together, or held on the body with riv nuts, for both the brake line and the fuel line. It comes all the way back to here, and then down here we have a Walbro 255 for what this motor is going to be putting out right off the bat. This should be plenty, and because it's all external right now, very easy to upgrade when it gets to that point. I do have a before fuel pump filter. It's the same size as the one that's down there. So before and after, it's recommended by just about everybody on fuel pumps to run it that way. And then I have my two lines going up to the inside of the hatch. And that's because my fuel cell for this setup is a top feed. It's made by FuelSafe. It is expired. I bought it ages ago, so I will have to get a new one when I finally go to the track. Anyways, I do have the factory e-brake cables. My rear disc brake conversion allows me to use the factory brakes, or factory e-brake cable. I'm also running the original lines for this car. Believe it or not, being originally an Arizona car, all the electronics and anything plastic are destroyed because of the sun, but anything metal is good. So I got nearly 45-year-old brake lines that are still good, and I'm gonna keep running them until something happens, because why would you do anything different? Now in the engine bay itself, because of my brake situation, that's different, but even then it's only slightly modified, and I'll show you when I get to that point. Off camera, I also had my dad stop by, and he helped me safely get my car off the rotisserie. I got a little PTSD almost from when I put the car on the rotisserie last time, just because it fell off and dropped almost 2 feet. So there was that. I was a little worried. I knew I could do it myself. I've done it before. It's just something about my new garage concrete floor, because it's a new to me but like 40-year-old pad. It's wonky. So I just had him come by and help me get it off the stand, or the rotisserie. So there's the rotisserie stands there, and it's back on next stands. And then I did one more thing, and that was this. If you can't tell, I put a fresh coat on some parts there and there. We'll get to those in just a second, but I did that just because those parts have been sitting, and they were painted at one point, but the little bit of driving I did do, the gravel road or gravel driveway I used to live on, chipped off a bunch of paint. So I took time to spray them down with some degreaser, get them cleaned up, spray them with some primer and some paint, just for me, if nothing else. It'll probably come off again. Just one of those things. It's a high stressed area of the car, so you know, it is what it is. But we got them cleaned up either way. Now that we got everything prepped and ready to go, we're gonna start putting the suspension and possibly drivetrain back into the Datsun. So I will go over what I have for the car, and I'll kind of go over why I chose those products. So let me switch you around here. And we will start with the front suspension on this car. So you'll notice, if you've been shopping around for Datsun parts, you'll notice the T3 control arms, tension rods, and tie rods. Now, there are a couple of companies that were out with these, but I like the amount of adjustability with these. Just they were the best thing when I bought them. Apex Engineered actually came out with their kit just after I had bought these, so I was kind of disappointed that they came out afterwards, but it is what it is. You'll notice the quick steer knuckles from Apex Engineered. I like their product. It gives a couple layers of adjustment, or not layers, but you know what I mean. So I did choose those. I am having a weird mix between the T3 parts and the Apex parts. The knuckle does not want to sit on this guy right here. Now, oh, sorry, that's out of focus. Now, I have talked with both T3 and Apex. Neither one of them can figure out what's wrong. T3 says that their stuff is designed that way. Apex says that it's supposed to seat within. I've actually sent the parts out, and it's just one of those weird things. I'm not really sure what I'm gonna do, because I like both of their parts, and I've already spent the money. I really don't want to spend it again to buy one or the other version. So when you're mixing parts, depending on price and preference, just make sure that everything works. In my case, it's kind of biting me in the butt, and I'm not sure what I'm going to do, but we'll figure that out. For the time being, I can get them tight enough where it's fine, but I just can't get them tight enough to where the cotter pin for the castle nut on the very top sits into the correct place. That's the issue right now. And for all the fancy parts, that pretty much does it for that. Now, my sway bars are kind of weird. These sway bars were on this car when I originally bought it, so I have no idea where they came from, but they're 1 inch, both front and rear, which, if you look at any other company, they don't offer anything like that. And the bushings that I have for the rear, I actually had to have a machine shop bore them out to get them to fit around the sway bar. super weird. Most companies offer like a 7/16, but nobody offers a 1-inch, especially rear sway bar. So I don't know where it came from. We'll see how it goes. There are guys that don't even run rear sway bars on the cars, so we'll see. I'm not really sure how I'm going to go about that. I haven't driven the car enough in the 10 years that I've owned it to really care about it too much. But now that we're getting closer to being able to drive it on a normal basis, it'll be one of those things where I'll just have to see how the car acts. Now this car runs a stock cross member. According to class rules that I'm kind of building this car around, I have to have that as a stock piece. They will not allow aftermarket pieces for that, which is why I don't go with something like Apex Engineered. So all I'm allowed to really have is the stock part, and then I can have things like upgraded bushings. So that's what we did here. Did upgraded bushings for the steering rack. This is a manual rack that's original for the car, and I have completely tore it down to all the pieces, re-greased everything. Had to be really careful because parts for these are really hard to find, but I took my time. Everything happened to still be good, even though the grease that was in the rack itself was rock hard. It was bad. So definitely one of those things that if your car's never been restored, definitely needs to be looked at. I'm surprised mine even worked, but I managed to get everything all taken care of. It's all greased up, good to go. Alright, and for the last part of the front suspension on this car, I'm running, I think they are Toyota S12W 4-pot calipers. These are actually brand new. They are power stop vented rotors. The bearings have been gone through, so these should be good to go. And then we finish it off with some BC Racing coilovers. These were bought shortly after BC actually came out with them. Since then, they have come out with, I think it's like a BR Plus or something. I don't know, I haven't looked. But once again, these coilovers have been on this car for a really long time, even though they have 0 mileage on them. A lot of these parts were bought right around the time that they came out. So unfortunately, there's been plenty of other options that have now become available, but I'm not gonna go out and buy all new parts when I got brand new parts sitting here.
Something actually worth it. I wanna look in the mirror and like what I see. I'm sick of feeling so worthless. You wanna sink or swim? I'm gonna go down swinging. Look deep within. I get lost in the feeling. I just need a win. I'm going off. I know it's time to make a change, and I can take the pain. You wanna sink or swim? I'm gonna go down swinging. Look deep within. I get lost in the feeling. I just need a win. I'm gonna find my meaning. I can make a change. I wanna play the game. You wanna sink or swim? I'm gonna go down swinging. Look deep within. I get lost in the feeling. I just need a win. I'm going off. I know it's time to make a change, and I can take the pain. You wanna sink or swim? I'm gonna go down swinging. Look deep within. I get lost in the feeling. I just need a win. I'm gonna find my meaning. I can make a change. I wanna play the game, yeah.
So for the moment, that is where I'm going to leave the front suspension. I'm not going to hook up the coilovers until I find a solution for the knuckle issue. I've thought of a couple ideas already, but until I actually try them out and figure out my solution and get it so I can get a cotter pin on top of that castle nut, I'm going to leave it as it's sitting right now. Just that way I make sure that I have safety first. Not to mention I still have brake lines and things like that that still have to be run to the front. So, but overall, yeah, coilovers, front suspensions in. I mean, it's starting to turn out to look like a good engine bay. So now we'll focus on the rears, and the rear suspension is actually all sorted out. I have had it all together for a while with no problems. It's got a couple of nice parts to it, so let me show you what I have, and maybe explain why I bought the parts that I did, and then we'll get it all reassembled. Alright, so this is the rear suspension setup of the Datsun. Looks pretty easy, right? Not so much. So we'll start off. This is the oldest piece of suspension on my Datsun. These are T3 lower control arms or Techno toy tuning. You can kind of see they've been a little beat up. Same deal as that gravel road from these guys. Hit these guys pretty good. But overall, they're a decent quality product, and if you know why I bought them, then you know. So if you're new to Datsuns, or you haven't had to mess with your suspension yet, you're in for a treat, especially if you have any other Datsun than one from like California and Arizona. And the reason being is I'll show you. That little hole right there, that is the absolute worst part of any Datsun ever. In the stock Datsun application 240, 260, 280Z, that little hole has a bolt slash keyway that holds the original pin that slides through the lower part of the rear knuckles. In the stock knuckle, or stock control arm, it slides through here, and it's literally a massive bolt. And it slides through that hole there and all the way across, and then that pin sits right in there. These are an absolute nightmare to get off, especially if you have anything but a Southern car, because they are bound to rust and seize. There are a few people that have made pullers, so if you can get that keyway out of there, you can then get the bolt that runs all the way through that thing out. But the problem is in order to get to it, to even like maintenance that part, you have to take the whole rear suspension off, because you have to flip the control arm upside down or inside out to be able to get to it when it's all stock parts. So it's a real nightmare. So the very first thing I did was I got these control arms, so I didn't have to deal with that, because I got lucky in having an Arizona car. I didn't have to deal with it. But most people don't get that lucky. Alright, seeing we're already on it, we'll go into the next part of my suspension or suspension and brakes, and that will be the rear disc conversion. Now these are really hard to get. These are Maxima calipers with an adapter plate. I had bought this adapter plate kit before I realized how hard these calipers were to get. I searched and searched and searched for these calipers. Everybody only sold the left one, nobody sold the right one, or maybe it was the other way around. Either way, you could only get one side of these things. I searched and I searched and I searched, and believe it or not, Summit Racing had them listed. So I ordered it through them, and it didn't show up. So I hounded them on getting me this caliper that they said they had. And come to find out, the only one that was left was directly from the manufacturer. They managed to get it to me, but it was the only one left nationwide. It was crazy. Like, so don't try to get this rear disc brake set up, because it's a pain in the butt. It might be better now. I'm not really sure, but the last time I checked, they were impossible to get. Seeing I painted all black, it's kind of hard to see, but then I have this guy right here. Doesn't look very impressive, but it is a CJ Cave 300ZX axle adapter, so I can run these guys. It's just a very well-known upgrade to go to the 300ZX axles using an adapter. The original 280, 240, 260 axles are U-joint axles, and they break pretty easy. And being a VA car, I didn't want to deal with it, so I figured I'd upgrade right off the bat and prevent a possible failure with any luck. The last couple of things on the list are my Arizona Z-Car drop mounts and my Arizona Z-Car rear diff mount. Now, it's surprising because for the most part, I have T3 and I have a lot of Apex engineered stuff on my car. I was shopping around for all these parts, all these suspension parts, and believe it or not, the billet aluminum ones sold by Arizona Z-Car ended up actually being cheaper than some of the other places, and the quality on these things are perfect. Granted, mine are now a little bit beat up because I've had them for a while, but they came in cheaper and the shipping was cheaper. And I used to live right next to these guys, and I never bought their parts when I live right next to them. It's kind of funny. Kind of wish I did. Maybe maybe it could have worked out something with them. But anyways, compared to everywhere else, they were just cheaper and good quality. So it's one of those things that just made sense. And my diff is still a factory diff. I've gone through it. I think it's a 393 rear diff. With all new fluids, it's been checked and everything, and a brand new OEM front diff mount, I guess is what you would call it. And then I'm pretty sure you saw it in the time lapse, what's called an RT diff mount, or RT Ernie, I think is what it used to go by. Anyways, it's a solid diff mount that sits on top of the rear diff, because there's originally a strap that goes over it to help with the shaking or the banging of the front part of the diff. So you just switch over to the poly version of it, and then that problem's all gone. But that is what I have in the rear of the Datsun. So let's get this all installed and move on to the next thing.
I'll take a face full of pavement just to make a statement. I know there's no turning back. Oh God, adrenaline wasted, so mad I can taste it. I know there's no turning back. I'll do what it takes, I ain't making mistakes like that. I'll bleed on your face to make you go take it back. I'll lose my shit, I go crazy when I'm mad. And now you go wish you would shut the fuck up real bad. And now that I'm gone, yeah, I know there's no turning back. And now that I'm gone, yeah, I know there's no turning back. I'll take smoke, I'ma poke a hole through you, choking's overdue. Come at me and you won't get any older, dude. Crack your holder too. Heating up inside of me, blood so violently, thanks for trying me. Now it's finally time to see how this rivalry becomes a dynasty. I know there's no turning back. Oh God, adrenaline wasted, so mad I can taste it. I know there's no turning back. I'll do what it takes, I ain't making mistakes like that. I'll bleed on your face to make you go take it back. I'll lose my shit, I go crazy when I'm mad. And now you go wish you would shut the fuck up real bad. And now that I'm gone, yeah, I know there's no turning back. And now that I'm gone, yeah, I know there's no turning back.
Well, that pretty much does it for the rear suspension. Everything is currently loose, just because of how everything gets bolted together. I wanted to get it all together, and then I'll tighten it up. Makes it so things don't bind. Last thing you want is a binding suspension. It can cause a whole lot of problems that way. So I just put everything loosely together, and then after it's all done, then I tighten it all up. And I'll take a paint marker to it, and that way I know everything stays tight. But yep, that does it for this. I didn't quite get where I thought I was going to. I didn't realize how much talking and how much video I had put into this one, and how much detail I'd put in this one. So we still have to get the rear brakes fully put on. Still got to put the wheels and tires on it before I can drop it down. So for the time being, I think that's going to do it for this one. And then in the next one, the car will be back on the ground, and we'll start focusing on some other things. And by then I will have a solution to my front knuckle problem. So until then, thank you for watching. Thank you for your support.
I work hard each and every day. I get lost in the words I say. I don't push pause, no I push play. I won't stop till I make a change. I withdraw on the things I make. I turn flaws into flawless traits. I build tall, never capped in space. I won't stop till I hear him say, oh, oh, la, 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 la.